In this video, we'll learn how to create procedural layers here inside of MARI. Alright, so up until now we've been talking about the various types of layers that we can create and use to texture our assets here in MARI. Now, one type of layer that I've referred to a few times in previous videos is called a procedural layer. And MARI does have support for this type of a layer. If you come over here and just mouse over this button right here, this is the location where you'll go to create procedural layers. Now, you'll also notice if we come over here and look at the little icon, that the icon for a procedural layer looks very similar to what you see here. It's kind of this square with a noise pattern inside of it. And I can tell you from my experience, I actually use procedural layers quite a bit. So I wanted to take a moment to run through some of these different procedural layers that you see inside my layer stack. Now, if I were to come over and select this explosives layer here, you can see this is a very, very simple procedural layer. We have any options or parameters that are available for a procedural layer. They'll show up right down here. Now, if you've hidden this area, you just simply need to mouse over this little perforation right here and drag that back up. Now, one of the most common procedural layers that I will use is a simple color procedural layer. Again, you can find that under Basic and then Color. Now, what this procedural layer will do is it'll create a layer of solid color, and that color can change. So the reason I like to use these types of layers is because I can quickly and easily make tweaks to them. Let's say for the color of her cape here, for example. If I decided I don't really like this green color, all I need to do is come in and quickly change that. I actually have the explosives selected here, so let me just come in here and kind of zoom in on those. Let's say that maybe we don't want those to be red. Maybe we want those to be green to match the cape. Well, we could come in here and just make that change, and you can see how quickly that takes effect here. So again, this is a non-destructive way of working. I'm not painting red pixels into these layers, which I absolutely could, because I'm allowing myself the flexibility to come in and make rapid changes like this to my textures. And maybe this is something you'll need to do if your work is being art directed, and maybe your director comes in and says, you know, those explosives don't need to be red, they're supposed to be green according to the story. So that's again something that adds just that kind of flexibility here. I'm going to come in and make those red again, just because for me those remind me of fireworks, and kind of the stereotype for a small firework explosive is red in my mind. I don't know why I have that in my mind, but let's go ahead and take a look at a few of these other procedurals here. Again, if we look at the knife handle, you can see again a simple color procedural layer. If we come up here and look at this wood is a little different. You'll see the contents down here below changed. So this wood procedural, you can actually find it if we go to the procedural layers under procedural and then plant. There is the wood procedural. You can see there are a number of different parameters here to sort of simulate a wood grain. And I've used this one actually very sparingly on this particular project. If I zoom in on sort of this gauntlet here, you see that she has these little things that are holding the leather straps together. In my mind, I wanted to see this be sort of a wood type material. And if I were to turn the lighting to flat, you'll be able to see here what this looks like. I'm going to zoom in really closely on that. You can see the two colors here that are being used. Now, we can absolutely customize this. We can come in and make this a lot rougher if we want to. We could come in and make it less rough. We can increase the size of those rings. We can decrease that size, whatever we want to. And we can even begin to start stretching these out in one of the three axes. So when it comes to procedural layers, no procedural layer is like any other. Each one of them does something very, very specific. So this just so happens to be one that can help you to create sort of a wood grain texture. All right. Let's go ahead and jump through and look at a few more of these. I've uncached the cloth detail group here. So you can see, again, if you start to expand these groups, you'll see there's a lot of procedural layers in here. Kind of the way that I use these is I will create a procedural layer for a certain area, say for example these explosives. Then I'll select those explosives and I'll make a mask from that selection. So that procedural layer only gets applied to a designated area that I want to use it on. So pretty much every procedural layer you'll see in here is going to have a mask attached to it. This one even has an adjustment stack. Let's go ahead and maybe click on a few of these here. Here is our cape, another color procedural, cloth padding, another color procedural, and the bandana. Now, the bandana is something a little different. Let's come up here and take a look at that. You can see it has sort of this texture on it. It looks sort of like that. Now, this is a tiled procedural. Let me come in and show you where you can find that one. Come in and find under procedural, and we'll go down to pattern, and you'll find tiled. So what a tiled procedural does is it allows you to take a tileable image, like this one here, connect it to the procedural layer, and then tile it across the surface it's applied to. Let me show you what that UV layout looks like for the bandana itself here. And there we go. Kind of zoom in on that a bit. All right. So you can see how this particular image is being tiled across this texture space, and it's being used to create the color and texture information for the bandana. Now we can come in and change a number of different parameters here for the tiled procedural. I don't want to necessarily get into all of them. You can do some interesting things like rotate the image. You can come in and adjust the number of repeats in both the U and the V if you wanted to maybe stretch it out in one of the two axes or squish it. You can offset it if your texture needs to be offset, and you can also mirror the texture. So again, this is using a single image and tiling it across a texture space. In the case of this particular procedural layer, again, I'm using it with a mask to limit it so that it only applies to the bandana. And then if you come in and click on the adjustment stack, you can see that I've used a simple HSV adjustment layer inside this stack. And again, I used a layer stack because I only wanted this adjustment to affect the bandana. And you can see I've come in and I've desaturated a bit. I've come in and changed the value as well as shifted the hue just a little bit, just to manipulate the colors of this image. All right, great. So there's a lot of really useful procedural layers inside MARI's procedural layer rollout here. Another one that I find incredibly useful, if you're struggling with finding just the right color for an element, let me just jump in here. I'm going to create this base color catalog. This one's actually very, very flexible. Now this is going to go on top of all of the layers that I've created here. So it's going to take just a moment for MARI to process this request because it's going to fill everything with a solid color. But what you can see here is that we have a material drop down. Now this drop down is massive, so if I were to come over and select that, it goes way beyond our recording area, and we can come in here and choose just the type of material we're looking for. Maybe we're looking for the material for, I don't know, porcelain. We can select that and it's going to give us a color. Now this color is the albedo color of porcelain, or what MARI thinks that color should be. Now we can come in and change this if we were looking for maybe reflectance, glossiness, roughness, whatever the case may be. We can come in and change this. Let's see what the roughness for porcelain would look like. It'll again take MARI just a moment to switch that around for us. And you can see the roughness for that is attempting to load here. Let me just... Yeah, it's just really, really hard to see against this gray background. It's almost the same color of gray. So this can be a really useful procedural layer if you're, again, struggling to get just the right color for one of your texture inputs for a very specific type of surface. Now, I wouldn't use this in a steadfast fashion. I would choose that particular material and then build on top of it in terms of its roughness or even its albedo color. So again, procedural layers inside of MARI are very, very powerful and can allow you a lot of flexibility when really building a non-destructive workflow for your own texturing.